The following game has been rated E for everyone by the ESRB. That means that the content in the game is appropriate for anyone aged 6 and up. And while it does not list any specific restrictions or warnings in regards to this specific game, I do know for a fact that it does involve rockets, explosions, and comedy involving rockets and explosions. That means if you are under the appropriate age for the video game, or you feel that this content is not appropriate for you, then you should not be watching this video. You have been warned. Greetings and salutations, I am Outlier and I bid you welcome to this channel. Joining me today is of course my usual co-hosts, Snowball and Wolf. And today we are returning back to Kerbal Space Program. So the premise of Kerbal Space Program is that you basically control space exploration organization akin to NASA. It's just that rather than having human astronauts, everybody is basically a little green man. Quite literally. And your job is to basically build prototype spacecraft and sometimes even aircraft, fling them away from the planet, try to do various space exploration things like get into orbit, land on the moon, launch the occasional satellite, and try not to get everybody killed in the process. Which is easier said than done, because if memory serves, the developers of this game implemented in a complete realistic physics setup, so that if you are off by even a little bit in terms of weight distribution and making your rocket lopsided when trying to launch straight up, it'll start somersaulting and if you're lucky, plow into the ocean. If you're not lucky, it plows back down into the launch pad and then you have to pay for repairs. I don't recommend that. Yes, I've played this game before. It's been a while. I don't remember how long it's been. It was one of the first videos. Go look it up. It's been a while. So much so, in fact, that if you actually look right here, they apparently installed quite a new upgrade. So it's now Kerbal Space Program 1.11. And they've added a whole bunch of things like EVA construction. Apparently they also have a cargo system now. Well, each Kerbal has their own inventory, and apparently they could have parachutes, which I was kind of unaware of. Can also repair parts while mid-mission. And there's also a bunch of new parts. So that's a whole lot of fun stuff to look at. This game is of course made by Thank you again. And that being said, let us begin. Alright, and we begin with starting a new game. Now I'm half tempted with all the new stuff to just simply start new as opposed to resuming a save. But if memory served, last video that I made, which was literally the last time I played this game, I didn't get very far. So let's actually see if we can get pick up from where we last left off. It's only been Yeah, I've completed one contract. It's still day one, and I only have 30 minutes in, so it's not too far in. Alright, so here we are. This is the Kerbal Space Command. Wrong button. Been so long I forgot which controls do what. So this is the KSC, I believe it's called. The Kerbal Command Center. This is basically where everything happens. So we have various chunks of things, like the admin building, which takes care of the high-end corporate financing fun stuff. The astronaut complex, where the astronauts sleep, live, work, and sleep when I'm not trying to get them killed. The R&D complex, which allows us to research new parts and other shiny things. The tracking station, which is basically a large radar building, which allows us to see what's going on in orbit and in near space. The vehicle assembly building, which allows us to build our spacecraft. The attendant launching pad, where we fling said spacecraft into orbit, or at least try to. The space hangar, where we can build airplanes, is basically the rough equivalent of the vehicle assembly bay. And a runway, where said space planes can take off, assuming that they don't follow suit with the Xbox version that I kept playing and constantly want to default to turning left and then rolling off the runway and exploding. We also have mission control, which is basically the control of all missions, hence the name, and it's where we can pick up contracts. So right now, we only have one contract currently active, where we need to haul a DT-12 decoupler in flight above Kerbin. Prestige is significant. We have over a year to complete it. And we need to have the D12 decoupler installed. We need to be flying in Kerbin. We need to be on Kerbin. We need to be flying, which means we need to be in midair. We need to be within a altitude of 26,000 meters and 29,000 meters. And we need to be between a speed of 190 meters per second to 1,160 meters per second. So, well, it's relatively easy to have the decoupler if I haven't actually unlocked it in the R&D lab. They just give me spare ones for free. Getting to Kerbin's relatively easy because that's where I start. Flying just basically means I need to be, well, airborne as opposed to being on the ground or in the water. And the really tricky ones are the altitude restrictions, because I need to be within 26 kilometers and 29 kilometers of the surface, so that's only a 3,000 meter difference, so that's a small window when flinging large rockets into space. I also need to be between a speed of 190 meters per second and 1,160 meters per second. This is usually hard to do, but given the wide range of speeds, it's actually relatively easy, especially given that 2,000 meters a second is basically orbital velocity. I don't remember what escape velocity is, though. Also, we have a ridiculously large amount of contracts available. Almost forgot the what they were called, including focused observational surveys, which basically has us fly to certain spots on Kerbin, take a crew report, and then land if memory serves. And they usually have an altitude restriction, like for instance, this one for integrated integrals, can't remember that corporation name, I need to be above 18,200 meters by a place called Manly's Whim. Whereas for Jeb's Junkyard, I need to be below 18,900 meters over Milligun's oversight. I can't pronounce the name of things anymore. So if I were to take these two contracts at once, and assuming they're right next to each other, I have absolutely no idea if that's true, but if I were to take them both at once, I would need to build a spacecraft to not only get there, but able to maintain an altitude between 18,200 meters and 18,900 meters. So that would be a 700 meter window, assuming I don't want to travel I don't build something that can get between those two areas. Unfortunately, this is well within the atmospheric limits, so I don't actually have the parts to actually build anything to do these focused surveys with, given the fact that but most of these contracts require an in-atmosphere flying vehicle, and plane parts are further up the the tech tree than I've gotten to. I also can test a radial decoupler at the launch site, which just basically means that I build something with this on it. I bring it to the launch pad, and I activate the part without actually leaving the launch pad. That's surprising. That's actually relatively easy to do. It's basically easy money. And I also need to test the Flea solid fuel booster while in orbit between 520,000 to 530,000 meters. So I actually got to get into orbit first for this one. And of course, I do have the world record milestones of trying to escape the atmosphere, which is flying at a vessel above altitude of 70,000 meters. Really should read what's there. And then we also have orbit Kerbal, which is basically get above 70,000 meters, because above that there is no atmosphere to slow us down, and basically get into a stable orbit, or what passes for a stable orbit. Basically, you just have to gain a trajectory and be traveling fast enough so that way you don't slow down and gravity pulls you back to the planet. As it says right here, fly a vessel up at it. Well, actually, no, it says it right here. You need to achieve a stable orbit around Kerbal. All you should need to do is throw yourself at the ground and miss. So basically, I'm traveling fast enough that the pull of gravity is pulling me down, but I'm traveling laterally compared to the surface of Kerbal, fast enough that the planet is actually falling away at roughly the same speed that my ship is falling. Like I said, they get well deep into the science of things. So if we leave the facility real quick and look at R&D, so yes, this is the stability section. Various fun little survivability, fun little parachutes. Get heat shields and radial chutes; those are always fun, as well as service bays and radiator panels and landing struts. But aviation is where all the plane parts come in. So, as I said, with with all those survey missions where I have to be between certain amounts of meters, but still be well within the atmosphere, these are the parts that I need to actually successfully complete those missions, and these are the parts I don't have access to, given the fact I need to get stability first. In order to get stability, I need 18 research points, of which I have 17.5. And even then, for aviation, I need an extra 45, so I'm not getting that anytime soon. Although I do have basic rocketry and basic engineering already completed, as well as basic parts, for lack of a better term. Ooh, what's this? Personal parachute. So these are the new parts that were mentioned. But the parachute is basically a Kerbal-sized ram air chute. Perfect saving trip pods from misconsidered aircraft designer. Hijinks revolving top, the top of the VAB, and hopefully functional autopilot. Of course, they always add in humor to the various descriptions. So, for instance, the second paragraph is, why should Kerbals put their trust in something that was found lying by the side of the road? Well, because there wasn't a Kerbal-shaped crater next to it. Was there any kind of crater? That's the key part. So, yeah, none of these are going to be happening anytime soon. I can test the radial decoupler at the launch site. That's relatively easy. As I said, easy money. So basically, I go to the vehicle assembly bay, and I need to build a spacecraft. So I don't think I actually have one saved. But if I look at the Missions, I have test a radial decoupler on the launch site and haul the D12 decoupler into flight above Kerbal. So, coupling. So the radial decoupler is something I don't actually have access to technically. At least I don't think so. It does say experimental on it. Yeah. So as I was saying before, if I don't actually have the part, like the D12 decoupler here, I'm basically given I really got to think about what I want to say. But I'm basically given experimental parts, so even if I don't truly have access to it, I can still technically, well, use it. Okay, so I do have some science equipment I could use, like the mystery goo containment unit and the 2-hot thermometer. These get me generate science reports, which I can use to generate science. For right now, where are the parachutes? Rare utility. The Kerbals really will not survive unless I give them a parachute. I'd also like to point out that the parachute's on the same phase as the standard decoupler, which actually is not the one that I actually want to use. So okay, so that should help with the aerodynamics and hopefully the balance of it all. As for two of these, put you there, because we're also getting solid fuel boosters, which should help get us up to the height that we need, because I'm not certain all this gas will work. I need another pair of decouplers, thusly. Okay, so here's my plan. That's interesting. It tells you how much. I guess it tells you how much thrust it's going to give you. So here's my plan. This pair of decouplers that aren't actually attached to anything. This is the first phase that goes. So this basically jettisons away. We're still on the landing pad. And then I fire off these rockets, which should hopefully get us at least airborne. And once they run out of fuel, which will be relatively quickly, I then use these radials, because I just happen to have them. They're experimental for the other job, so why not make use of them? I then jettison them to get rid of these, and then use the liquid fuel rocket to hopefully get within the airspeed and distance that I need. And once I get to there, this decoupler fires and jettisons the engine. So, but just the engine, not the fuel tank. So it won't have any fuel and automatically stop. And that'll get me the second job. And once that gets flagged, I then jettison the second decoupler, which gets rid of the fuel tanks. And after that, all that's left is the parachute. Which will hopefully deploy because I don't believe I have drogue chutes yet. No, I don't. Which will hopefully deploy in a manner and speed to the point where it doesn't tear on the way back down, because 1,200 and some odd, 1,160 meters per second is quite fast, even if 190 meters per second isn't. So this looks good for right now. So if we look at crew, so I do have basically 4 people, 2 pilots, Jebediah Kerman and Valentina Kerbin. I also have an engineer of Bill Kerbin and a scientist of Bob Kerbin. And since the pilots are what I need, I can actually change their flight suits. That is interesting. You can also change the colors. Might want to consider playing with that later. But since Jebediah and Valentina seem to have both the same amount of experience, which, to be fair, isn't all that much, I'll just go with Jebediah for right now. Alright, so that looks all good. Now if I can just remember the controls, also cargo. Alright, if all else fails... Oh, it actually starts with the parachute. Okay, that's cool. Alright, so if all else fails, and the chute isn't working, I guess I can just have him leap out and use that parachute. Not that I've ever tried before, and if he's going fast enough for this parachute to tear, something tells me this parachute won't help save him. But that's the whole point of the game. So let's launch. Right, now if I can just remember how the controls work. Okay, that's braking. Okay, that's yaw, pitch. Alright, so that's max and 0 thrust. That's roll. So that's hold for SAS. That's gear. That's RCS thrusters. There we go, that toggles SAS. So, as I said, SAS on, which is what I always do. Very being thrust to... Actually, you know what? Let's not have thrust to max, because the whole point of having the solid fuel boosters on a different phasing is to... Staging. I keep calling it phasing. Staging it is. Staging is so that way they burn off and I don't waste fuel trying to get off the ground. Right, was not expecting them to explode like that, but that works. So I managed to complete the contract, I hope. Yep. Tested the radial decoupler at launch site. So there we go, and let's see if we can take off. We can. Right, and we're already at the speed that we need. And that's gone out, so we jettison those. And then we kick on the thruster. Okay, that didn't work. Let's revert flight to launch. Did I need to manually fill the fuel tanks? No, liquid fuel. Or... is it a case because of this decoupler, the fuel isn't getting to the thing, and I don't have fuel lines. Alright, the fuel I don't think is actually getting... There we are. Had to enable crossfeed for the lower decoupler. So now fuel can get to the fuel tank. Every accident's just learning. Right, and because of reverted flight this time, I believe, yeah, the first contract technically didn't complete. So let's just do that right now. Hit whatever that thing is, and so we're good there. So off we go. Alright, so we jettison those, and they hit back on the launch pad. Pick up the thrust, and fire. Alright, now I don't want to be going too fast. Or not. That's not good. Alright, now I'm going straight down, now I'm going straight up. Come on. Back up. Stop. And now we are completely out of gas, so we did not bring enough fuel for this. Okay. Revert to the assembly. Alright, so since this thing is now larger, let's use the larger pods. Alright, let's try this now. Of course, now the problem is I'm carrying more fuel, which means it's now heavier. Alright, so now the problem is that while it is larger, it's also in carrying more fuel, it's also heavier, which means the rockets will take more effort just to get it moving. Meantime, SAS on. Ooh, direct hit on that circle thingy. I mean, oh no, we hit that. Oh dear. Right, firing thrusters. And since they're bigger, they're carrying more fuel and they also generate more thrust. So we're actually traveling faster, which means we'll probably go higher. Right, and they're now out, so we jettison them, kick on the thrust, and fire that off. So if nothing else, I'm hoping it keeps us stable. So we get 26,000. Hopefully we'll have enough speed. Alright, there we are. Jettison that. That contract is complete. Of course, we are also heading straight up. And now my main worry is that we're going to be traveling too fast. For the chute to work. As you saw on the way up, it flagged red, which means if I had deployed the chute then, the chute would have been destroyed. Should also like to point out that we are actually still going upwards at over 400 meters a second. So while I should have cut back on the thrust, I was worried about, doing the whole somersaulting thing if I had done that. But I'm curious if just stuff, I mean, we had plenty of fuel. We could have actually gotten over orbit with this vehicle. Not over orbit, past the atmosphere. And we technically may, because we're still traveling, while we are decelerating because of the pull of gravity, we are still traveling upwards. Huh. Alright, and now we are going down. So we almost hit atmosphere. Almost, we're shy like less than 6,000 meters. Of course, now the problem becomes, let's just jettison this so that way we're lighter. Now the problem becomes, are we going to slow down enough so that we can deploy the chute before we pancake into the ground? And I'm not certain if deploying the chute at this height will do anything. Also, the fuel tanks are right there. So they are now, because they still have fuel, they are now basically a falling bomb. But that's for the guys on the ground to worry about. Yeah, Jebediah is happy now. Just wait until we get to the point where the chute explodes. And we're now traveling at almost 600 meters a second. Of course, we haven't actually hit the true atmosphere yet, so... Yeah, now the parachute has a warning light on it, so if we get any faster, now it's red. So if I deploy the chute now, it will be destroyed. And that's the gas tank, I believe. Thankfully, it looks like it's falling out of water. Out over water, so it shouldn't blow up my space center. And I am actually decelerating now because of wind resistance, which is thankfully good, because at this speed, he would have been dead. And now I'm at a slow enough speed I can deploy the chute without it being destroyed. I'm just going to wait until he gets to, we'll say 7,500 meters. Or, right about now. Then the chute deploys. 5,000, something explodes. At 5,000, the chute actually opens, and his speed is cut from 200 meters a second to an actual survivable of 5. So if we jump this to warp times 4, because at this speed, he's still literally over 4 kilometers above the surface, it will take him forever to get back down. In fact, even at 4 times the speed, it'll still probably take him forever to get back down. Alright, and here we are back now over, well, less than 100 meters from the surface. Still relatively, well, I should point out, I am actually, this is based on sea level, and I am actually 65 meters, the ground 65 meters above sea level. So that's above ground level, that's above sea level. Huh. I wonder if they added in the ability to change that. Anyway, so Jebediah Kerman has made a successful landing, and by successful I mean he didn't explode on impact, and that's always considered successful in my book. So we recover the vessel, what's left of it, which is basically the pod, and I believe the parachute. Alright, so we gathered 1 gig of data, required 0 science, because it's zero. We didn't do anything scientific. Okay, so we can recover the command pod and the parachute and some small monopropellant that was in the command pod because it comes with it by default. And so we do recover some funds. We don't actually get to keep any spacecraft we build. And depending upon how far we are away from the Kerbal Space Center, that's the official name. Can't remember what I called at the beginning of the video, but the KSC. Determines how much value we actually get. So if it's on the other side of the world, we get less value. And Jebediah's returned safely. He doesn't get any experience because he already went up and down once. So I believe if he leaves atmosphere, he should get one more point of experience, and if he gains at orbit, gains another one, which should be enough to get him up to level 2, which means he becomes actually somewhat useful. But we also have the ability to purchase other astronauts. So we have more engineers, a couple more pilots, one scientist, and they have various levels of courage and stupidity. I would like to point out that I was going to say that the scientist has the highest stupidity, but no, that's actually the engineer. But I digress. Also, we have available, currently assigned, which means that they're in mid-mission. You can actually have multiple missions going at the same time, and lost means that you got them killed, and if you have respawn active, they haven't respawned yet. So there's that. So we'll go back to the mission control. We no longer have an active quest because we completed those. And, alright, so it can test a heat shield, if I so choose. I just have to select the part and hit run test while at 40,000 to 49,000 meters in altitude and traveling 1,520 meters per second to 1,940 meters per second. So I know that's possible. Could also test a radial mount drogue chute between an altitude of 1,000 meters to 5,000 meters. It's 1,000 to 5,000 meters while traveling at a rather slow speed of 90 meters a second to 150 meters per second. Not so certain how easy that's going to be. Well, yes, the requirements for it are low, but given the fact you are basically firing off rockets, no, basically about it, you are firing off rockets which are designed to travel at ridiculously fast speeds. I mean, you saw how the hammers took off last time. They were over the speed limit relatively quickly. Far before I think they even hit the 1 kilometer mark. So that's going to take some fudging. Well, I know it can escape the atmosphere. We actually practically did that last time. In fact, if I wasn't so worried about going over the speed limit before hitting the altitude limit, I quite easily could have actually left the atmosphere. Because even though you leave the atmosphere, you still are affected by gravity, and it's gravity that pulls you down, not the atmosphere. So let's just try to leave the atmosphere this time. And I should no longer have the radial decoupler. I mean, I still technically have them attached, so I could arguably still use them. But I feel bad for doing that. So let's get actually, you know what? Hang on. Don't save. Can I actually... Where is the radial decoupler? Here we are, radial decoupler. So I can actually unlock it right now. I do have 21.5 research, and it only takes 18. So let's actually go do that. And we also get the an advanced winglet, which basically gives us more in-atmosphere control over the older wing. And we also get an aerodynamic nose cone, which should help dealing with drag on the side engines. So I was going to say I would feel bad still using the radial decouplers without actually having access, truly having access to them. But now I truly have access to them, so I'm going to use them. Okay, so there's that. Also, I'm going to get rid of these wings because we now have better wings. Where is aerodynamics? Here we are. These up higher because we're going to use the aerodynamic nose cone on the side thrusters. Alright, so again, staging, we use the solid fuel thrusters first, and then we decouple them. And once that's done, I actually don't need the lower decoupler now, the lower decoupler now. So I can just get rid of that. And also, because I need science to unlock new parts, I'm going to stick a pair of goo containment units on the side of the command pod, and one thermometer. You know what? Hang on. Let's bring these up slightly. And I can stick the thermometer directly underneath them. Yeah, those look like that they're on straight. So now I can run 4 scientific tests using taking 2 temperatures and using the goo twice while piloting the craft. So if this thing survives, I should be able to get more science because of it. Now, the more I use the science equipment, the less of an effect that they have. And I believe the door's right there. So Jebediah get to go last time, so we're going to pop him out and put in Valentia. She still has the same survival gear. Okay. Alright, so I'm confident that this won't explode upon launch, so let's go. Just checking stagings. Yeah, okay. And so let's go launch. Alright. SAS on once again. Okay, so that's how you fine-tune throttle control. Shifted control. Learn something new every day. Okay, let's just go. Also, let's log the temperature. And we start somersault. So, let's keep this. You know what? Let's not keep this. Revert flight back to the vehicle bay. Right, more wings. Lots and lots of more wings. Of course, now I exceed the part allotment, so I can't actually use all these wings. Darn. Well, maybe having them lower will help. Let's try this. SAS on once again. I'm curious if... Alright, so I can actually take the temperature from the launch pad. They are quite literally nominal. I can actually get 2.4 science just by sitting here. Or 1.7 science if I decide to transmit the data as opposed to reacquiring the data at spaceship recovery. So let's try this now. Yeah, I'm getting some pitch problems. But everything does seem to be stable for, well, right now. Alright, jettison those. Start the main thruster. Log the temperature. Keep that. Observe the mystery goo. You can get 7 science by that. It jiggles and wobbles as the craft flies. Okay. So putting down the wings is probably a good idea, but let's actually kill thrust because I'm starting to see red, basically red fire going on, which is not a good sign given the fact I have no ablative surfaces. We are going quite fast, and I do have plenty of fuel if need be, so there's that. So I can get a temperature scan from the upper atmosphere, but I actually want to get one after we leave the atmosphere. So let's put up the thrust a little, because I don't think we hit escape velocity just yet. And we've left the atmosphere. And we are actually still going straight up. So in theory, if I turn this slightly and fire it, I might in theory technically be able to achieve orbit. I doubt it because orbit's ridiculously hard to achieve. Alright, but let's log the temperature. Yeah, we can get 8 science from here. And observe this mystery goo. And we get 10 science. The goo has seemed to be clumped into sphere, has also become brittle while in outside of atmosphere. And I'm still technically going up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the rocket. Trying to find retrograde. So this is prograde. This is the direction that the rocket is traveling in. If I go... I forget what this one's called. As well as the purple ones. But this is retrograde. So if I fire this off now, it should actually help with braking. Right, so I am now technically out of fuel. So if... Where's the map? Okay, so this is technically kind of good. I say technically because this is the orbital... This is the trajectory path that this vessel is currently on. So I basically left from here, and if I were to travel straight up, I would have kept going straight up. Had I enough fuel to travel sideways or laterally, this trajectory arc would have kept expanding, expanding, expanding until eventually it would have become an orbital line. Basically, it exceeds the surface of the planet. But with this trajectory means that I'll get as high as the aposis, which is the maximum height of this trajectory, will be 312,628 meters, at which point I will then go down, start decelerating and start falling down again. I mean, I'm technically still decelerating. But it also means that this vessel should land right about here unless there's some other force that's going to affect it. And technically, since I'm out of fuel, I don't have any other forces available outside of jettisoning that. So this is now off by its lonesome. Now, I believe that the capsule is a built-in heat shield, which is its bottom piece right here. So let's actually keep that pointed at the ground. So right now, we'll just keep it pointed at prograde, which is still technically the direction of travel. Whereas the rest of the debris will just simply go flying off. And because it's also still suborbital, in terms of speed, it'll still land on the ground somewhere, which means I would say I would probably drop it on somebody's house, but I don't believe I've ever actually seen any cities on Kerbin. So I'm assuming lore-wise, everybody is basically lives underground. Although there's apparently another launch site somewhere, as well as a desert airfield. I know that there's an airfield on the island just off the coast of the KSC. But if we warp it, yeah, we warped it too fast and it jumped all the way around. But oh crap, that was the parachute. All right, let's try this again. Wrong button. Wrong button. SAS on. You saw nothing. Fire. But I know it works. Also, I know I get more science now from being in the upper atmosphere, so rather than using the first set of science equipment, right now I'll wait until we get higher. And I just need to achieve suborbit, so going straight up is perfectly fine. In fact, I can technically stop it right now and we'll achieve our goal. I probably should, because I'm again getting red heating along the sides of the vessel, which is not a good thing for, well, vessels of this low equipment. So let's log this temperature and observe this goo while we're still in the upper atmosphere. Didn't see exactly how much that was, but yeah, 9 data. Seems to be getting very cold now. Alright, and we've now left the atmosphere. So let's log the temperature here, as well as observe this goo. So rather than it getting very cold, now it clumps into a sphere and has become brittle. Alright, and so on that note, if we flip this thing around to point retrograde, and fire off the thruster, we can add to our braking burn. So now we should actually be traveling downwards. And let's mess with the trajectory yet again by trying to slow us further in the opposite direction. I'm just trying to bleed off the fuel, truth be told, if I'm being fully honest. I do have a little bit of fuel left, so let's flip it around yet again. And I'm actually in atmosphere right now. So, let's burn off the rest. Then we're good. We jettison that. 3-point retrograde, so again, the shield is actually facing, well, what passes for down. And because we messed with the trajectories, all manner of God knows what, POSIS for right now is going to be 68,370 and decreasing meters. And it's decreasing because I'm still technically in orbit. Actually, I think we actually passed POSIS because we are actually going down. So, yeah. And so we're going to land somewhere in this mountain range by the looks of it. Let's kick up the time warp a little. Let's lower the time warp a little. Get back to pointing retrograde. And hope we slow down long enough. Oop, nope, wrong one. Because we're 10,000 meters above the surface. On the plus side, we actually are now low enough to, traveling slow enough that the should have no problem. Alright, so I'm guessing that was the rest of the spacecraft exploding. We're now below 5,000 AGL, so let's pop the chute. And the chute opens. And I have no idea where the rest of the craft actually exploded. But it should have no fuel, so it's just basically bunches of a bunch of metal scrap hitting the ground at ridiculously fast speeds. So there shouldn't be any fireball because there's no fuel. Increase the time warp because again, 3 kilometers AGL is still going to take a while. Especially when traveling at 0.75-ish meters a second. So Valentina should now survive. Alright, now we have less than 100 meters AGL. Or 1,400 ASL. Almost forgot what the acronym is for above sea level. And we are now on the ground. So, actually, let's take a crew report while we're in the mountains. Crew assessment of the situation. We get an extra 1.5 points, an easy 1.5 points of science off of that. And now that we're safely landed, let's recover the vessel. Alright, so the crew report from Kerbin's Highlands nets us 1.5 science. Temperature taken for the Kerbin's upper atmosphere is 7.2 science. Temperature scan while in space near Kerbin is 8 science. I don't think achieving an orbit will get us better science. The mystery goo observation from Kerbin's upper atmosphere is 9 science. The mystery goo observation while in upper atmosphere while in space, I should say, is 10 science. And recover a vessel after a suborbital flight, it nets us 8 science just for doing that the first time. So all told, we get 43.7 units of science just off of this one mission, without ever having to need to complete a contract. So we get 51 science. So we're now at a total of 51.2 science, which means fresh new parts, which we're going to need because the next non-contract job is to travel. Well, it's to get into orbit, and I don't think we can actually do that with the parts we got. So parts recovered 70.2 kilometers from KSC, which decreases the total percentage of value we can get. So while we do gain more funds because we salvage more parts, they wouldn't be as much as if we landed right on top of the KSC. And no experience gained for Valentia Kerbin, I should say. because apparently leaving atmosphere isn't worth an XP point. Getting into orbit apparently is. And it's now almost nighttime. So tracking station. I don't actually have any objects on the surface in orbit or on the surface, so there's nothing to track. Although these are all the locations for all those survey missions that you saw. So Frazen's Jess is right there. Dafkin's Pride is right there. And then Site 18D and Area CB-X are right there. And Milligan's Oversight's right over the island airfield. Okay. And then it gives me various things that it can sort through. So basically I can toggle debris if I have any debris floating in orbit. Various probes, rovers, landers, if I have any ships, stations, bases, planes, relays, EVAs, flags, space objects, which there aren't any in near orbit. Also, it tracks the Mun, which is the closer of the two moons, and it also tracks Minmus. Yeah, Minmus, which is the smaller and farther away of the two moons. I also get information in Kerbin, and I think... yeah, I can actually speed up time, so that way I can pass time just sitting around. Yes, various world first milestones. And if we look at contracts, I need to test the basic jet engine over Kerbin. So next technical job is to orbit Kerbin, which, again, I don't think I have the parts capable of doing that. I basically need more fuel, better rockets, better parachutes, all that fun stuff. Which I can actually get if I put research into survivability and general rocketry. I only have 16.2 science left, so I can't get advanced rocketry, general construction, which actually nets me the crew cabin, which I would need if I want to take somebody other than just a pilot up. I mean, technically, I can take other Kerbin. I can have other Kerbins that aren't pilots pilot the vessel. Well, get in the crew pod, but the crew pod only sits one, and without a computer to control SAS, which is the automatic orientation, so that way it doesn't go all lopsided and wonky, I would have to do that manually, which I don't trust the engineers and the scientists to do. And then there's also aviation parts, various flight control, and basic science, which nets me actually electrical parts. And radiators. And the science junior and equipment storage. And then as the tech tree goes on, we get more and more advanced parts. So alright, now that we have some new shiny parts, newer and shinier parts, let's just dump all of this. Probably didn't need to do all of that, but this is the door, right? Yeah, it looks like the door. Okay. So, as usual, we got heat shields now. Okay, cool. I wasn't certain. A lot of times I would have a heat shield on the front of the craft and then a parachute on top. Because with the more advanced designs that I made, everything kept flopping over forward, so it would burn up upon re-entry, and because the heat shield would be on the back. And I got tired of it and thought, you know what, if it's just going to fly forward, then I'll just put a heat shield on top. So now we have these drogue chutes, which deploy at a higher altitude and help slow the craft down. Then we have the radial mounted chutes, which are basically these, just on the sides. And ideally, you have the drogue chutes fire first, and then once they slow the craft down enough, you fire the main chutes. I probably don't need this many parachutes, especially if I'm just trying to keep just this cabin surviving. But, let's stick a pair of barometers and thermometers on this thing. If I'm building a vehicle to survive more than just the pod, I would probably use the drogue chutes and probably actually use mystery goo containments, because if I put two here, if I only put one here, it's going to mess up the aerodynamics. So I have to keep it in parallel, but if I do that right here, it'll block the door, which means they can't get out easily. If I put it here, it would go over the barometer and the thermostat. So no mystery goo for this trip. But if we look at fuel tanks, I now have the T200 fuel tank. So it carries twice as much fuel as the T100, which doesn't add anything per se, but it basically allows me to carry more fuel with fewer parts. So until I upgrade the... I can't remember if it's the launch pad or the VAB. I can only get 30 parts, and the mass has to be under 18 tons. As well as be within, it can't be more than 20 meters in height, 15 meters in width, and 15 meters in length. Otherwise, I can't launch the craft. So the bigger tanks is basically a quantity issue. So whereas with, on the past when I had like 10 T10 fuel tanks, I can get the same amount of fuel with just 5 and have that amount of parts, which means that's 5 more parts I can use to build, well, add in whatever else I want. So the Reliant looks like it gets a little bit more thrust. Well, it gets more thrust at sea level than the Swivel, as well as a little bit more thrust in vacuum. So it also burns fuel faster. So let's actually throw in one extra fuel tank for this thing. And almost forgot. Oh, I actually get a service bay now. So I can put small little things in the service bay. Can I actually... Where's my science? I can actually put 2 goo containers in the service bay. I usually just keep it for batteries. Alright, where are the doors on this thing? They're in there. There. I'm trying to rotate it so that way the doors are actually beneath the cabin. So that way I can put on a pair of radial chutes just underneath the thermometer. So that should help with keeping the service bay intact. If I close that. Okay, so they're still good. Then I need a decoupler, coupler there. Stick that on it. So I now have 9 parts to play with. So I need aerodynamic wings. These about halfway down. A little bit over halfway, because I'm also putting 2 radial couplers on. Somehow the main thrust I got in the staging with the parachutes. It's probably a bad idea. And then engines, because I now have the thumper solid fuels are freaking massive. Alright, so I have one extra part with this. Let's lower the radial coupler to here. Yeah, that actually exceeds the maximum tonnage, so I can't actually use those. Alright, so let's try this out. Yeah. Okay. In fact, let's actually lower the wings. Seemed to work out better the last time. Alright, so let's fling Jebediah up into space. Let's not fling Jebediah up into space, because I just realized we did not adjust the stagings. Keep calling it phasings. It's stagings. But I can do that here, so SAS on, just for fun. Take a crew report while sitting on the launch pad for 1.5 science. And let's see if he dies. Yeah, yaw's having a problem. Roll seems to be, and pitch seems to be fine. Kick the thrust to on. Doesn't really mean anything right now because we're just going straight up and the liquid fuel hasn't engaged yet. Let's jettison the solid fuel and fire off the liquid. So let's see if we can turn this vessel slightly. I think we're pointing eastish. Yeah, 90 degrees is east. So let's point it a little bit this way. Look at the map. Where are we? Yeah, so since we're actually pointing slightly east, we're not going as high as quickly, but we are going, but the curve is extending out more this way. So if we angle it more this way, because we're now at 90 meters a second, it's killed thrust because we got a quarter of the tank left. In fact, let's open these. Use one of the goo. It's getting very cold now. We only get 1.2 science off of it now because we already did this one. Let's log a temperature data. Get 0 science because we already did it. And let's log pressure data, which we get 10.8 science because it's new. And we're just going to close this. Alright, so we'll get 96.70 meters. 96,000. Yeah, 96.7 kilometers, I should say, up, but we're only going that far lateral-wise, so needed more fuel and a better thruster, and probably more thrusters, and probably more stuff, but we're now over outside of the atmosphere, so if we use the other goo container, now we already did that experiment, so we already know what happens. But we log the temperature here. Again, 0 science because we've done it here. And log pressure, which there isn't none because we're in a vacuum. We get 12 science. let's close this and briefly fire off the thruster. See if we can actually extend this any further. But let's not actually go up, let's go sideways. So let's try to point it at the horizon as close as we can. Let's kill the thrust because we have almost no gas left. And as you can see now, we're actually probably going to angle halfway around the world. So it's not enough to actually get us into orbit. And we don't have enough gas to go much further than that. So rather than chancing it, we'll just flip over to retrograde. As close as we can get without any reaction control systems. Outside of a little gerbil running in a wheel in the command pod. Don't try to convince me otherwise. That's not the default RCS of the command pod. And then fire off the last of our gas, trying to slow us down. Alright, so that did next to nothing. Alright, so let's jettison the rest of this. Get rid of that. And since the debris is not gonna land anywhere near us, I don't really care where it goes. But let's fast forward time. Just so that way we're not sitting here for 2 hours. What is... Alright, so we're still at 80 some odd kilometers, and it's the middle of the middle of the night. So let's again point retrograde. Of course, I just realized there's no heat shield on the underside of the service bay. That could be a problem. Well, because the crew pod naturally has an ablative heat shield on the bottom, so reentry won't actually cause it to overheat, but the service bay doesn't. So as we hit atmosphere, going at 2 clicks a second, which is not a good thing even with a highly advanced craft and actual heat shields, this thing may actually light on fire. But that's going to be an issue for 20,000 meters ASL. Yeah, so now we hit the actual thicker atmosphere, which is what the red burning fiery fireball of death is. It's actually us hitting the atmosphere and trying to slow down. That's how it actually works in real life. Now we're really slowing down. I'm not seeing temperature warnings, so I'm assuming the surface bay is okay. If not, it's going to explode. Come on, keep pointing. Alright, so we're no longer pointing retrograde, and now everything's exploded. Oops. Luckily, we still have the top parachute. I think the side... No, actually, no, the side parachutes didn't burn off. So we have the side chutes and the drogue chutes. So all of our science equipment exploded. And we are actually slowing down enough so that way the drogue chutes should technically allow us... No, they're not. They're not gonna... We're not slowing down fast enough. We're too aerodynamic this way, and we don't have enough control surfaces Drogue chutes are good. Deploy the drogue chutes, flip us around, and brake like it's no tomorrow, because we're over 2.5 kilometers above sea level, which is technically 2 kilometers AGL, and deploy the main chutes, so that way we don't die on this. Right, and they haven't fully extended yet. But I think I didn't change it, so that way they should auto-deploy at 1 kilometer. We're not that high above sea level. Only what? 500 meters? And now the main chutes deploy, and Jebediah doesn't die. So always fun. Let's speed up time on the last kilometer, and I was almost worried at that. Ironically, the service bay is still intact. And I think... yeah, the goo pods are still intact. So it was the barometers and the temperature gauges that exploded. I wonder if I still have those reports. Oh, we'll find out once we recover the craft. This happened all because I was trying to keep pointing retrograde, and the aerodynamics of the craft flipped it over, which has been my experience what happens. That's why in later craft, if I ever keep playing this game, I'll actually just put a large heat shield on the nose, because I know it's not going to go butt first in to atmosphere, so I'll just have it fly head first and hit the shield that way. And landing. Should point out I almost lost the parachutes on that one. Recover vessel. Okay, so crew report from the launch pad gets us 1.5 science. Because we already used the mystery goo, we only get 2.3 and 2.1 science, respectively. And we only get 1.3 data science from recovery of a vessel after suborbital flight. So we do not get the reports from the barometers because they exploded. Good to know. But we're now at 24.4 science. Still not enough to actually get anything new. I mean, I need, well, 45 apiece to get the next tier. But that is all going to be another issue for another day, because I'm going to call it here. Everybody stay safe from the plague, and have a good day.